understand the concept that your mind is not your brain, and your mind changes your brain. And that based on that, mind management becomes absolutely essential in us being able to cope with anything that we've gone through.
I think you gotta have a dream.
The School of Greatness.
Really? Yeah.
Please welcome Lewis Howes.
How important is food when we are looking to detox our brains in general? How important is the foods we put in our body for our brains?
I'm so glad you asked that question. And just quickly to pick up on, I was telling you just before we started, how people are still commenting after, like weeks later, months later, after the last podcast, on how they love your show and how they loved our conversations. So thank you for the opportunity. No, really, you're a great interviewer, and it's just wonderful chatting to you. Food is such an important thing. So basically, we know that, but it does have a massive impact. But what for me is so interesting about the food side is the fact that our mind controls the digestive system. So our mind is our aliveness. So the difference between you and I and a dead person is our mind. So for our gut to function and to be able to digest all the parts of our gut, to be able to digest food, our mind's actually running the show. And most people don't actually think about it like that. But if you're eating a really healthy, organic, sustainable, farm to table, local, all the right to know the real food,
right.
the
Non-GMO, dairy,
non-GMO, the whole but you're in a mood, or you're not dealing with something traumatic, you're not dealing with an issue that's like a relationship issue, or you're just in a bad state of mind as you're eating. You could lose up to 86% of that nutrition just by the state of your mind, because your mind is driving your mind is basically that whatever you're thinking about is activated in your mind, in your brain, and in your body. And then your enteric nervous system, the whole thing is activated. And your enteric nervous system, which is the connection between the mind and the brain, this feedback loop, is driving the whole process. So, or being driven by your mind. So it responds very, very quickly. There's a very quick direct link between mind, brain, gut. Very, very fast. It's throughout the whole body, but it's extremely fast to the gut. And the gut has as many neurons in as the spinal cord. So we have about 300,000 neurons in our gut, which is about the amount we have in our spinal cord. So you probably, you would have heard of it, the gut-brain connection. And in the last 10 years, it's become a huge field of research in the microbiome and all that stuff, and how that's a lot to do with our intelligence, and how serotonin, 95% is in the gut, and 90% of dopamine. And so all these things, there's such a relationship. But what we don't always think about is that thought that you're thinking in your mind is actually activating and growing that whatever you're thinking about and whatever you're adding on, changes are happening in your brain. That's going to your gut. And everything involved in the process of digestion, including the pancreas and the gallbladder and the different parts of the intestine, the stomach, everything is being driven by these energy waves from the mind. So if our thought is toxic, you can, for example, let's just take one of the organs, the pancreas. The pancreas secretes 20 different neuropeptides that are required for the assimilation of food. And if you are in this mood or worried or anxious or not dealing with something or having a fight with someone, those 20 neuropeptides won't be secreted properly, or maybe only a few of them. And that's going to impact everything else. And then you just don't digest. The bloating people get, the gut issues, the sore stomachs, or leaky gut, constantly not dealing with our stuff wears down the lining of the gut. I mean, this just creates inflammation. The gut bacteria get affected. Your good bacteria go into hiding, and it's like a million different things. So that is so important. So I like to talk, Lewis, about the mindset behind the meal, as opposed to just the meal. And we focus so much on the food and diet that I think we've forgotten the most important component, which is mind. So I think we should manage that first, and then use that to manage the dietary aspects.
So can you eat bad foods and still have a good mindset around it and process those foods in a healthy way, so you actually take the nutrients out of it, or it doesn't affect your gut, or your building fat cells or whatever with this greasy fried sugary processed foods? Could you still have a healthy body with the right mindset, or do you also need the right nutrients and the right mindset to
you need both. You need both. Eventually that junk food is going to accumulate in your body. And we know that we are eventually going to create an environment, because our brain and body are the environment for the mind to operate in. So if the environment of the brain and the mind are affected physically by junk food, and as you said, the processed foods and things, it is going to wear the body down. Those excess chemicals, they cause leaky gut. They do all the things to the cardiovascular system. I mean, we know there's just so much research around that. So it's both. It's both.
But what I'm hearing you say is you could have all the healthiest foods and be thinking toxic thoughts, or in abandoning yourself over and over, or staying in the wrong relationship, or not speaking up for yourself, or not forgiving something from your past and holding on to that. And it won't do much for you to have those healthy foods, or it might create inflammation still, or have leaky gut because of the mindset. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Wow. And that's an aspect that people don't recognize. And it's not spoken about. It's not studied enough. It's, we always talk about 4 pillars or 3 pillars. People talk about diet, exercise, managing stress, as though they're 3 separate components. Meanwhile, the driving force is your mind, because if you're dead, none of those other things matter anyway. So your mind is your aliveness, and it drives all the others. So we've got to focus on the mindset, because you maybe, how many times do we hear of people that they are in their early 50s and they've been exercising and they've been eating well, and they're always smiling and they seem to be fine, and they drop down dead, or they commit suicide.
They have a heart attack or something. Yeah,
they have a heart attack, or something like that, and think, how? I mean, they're so healthy. So your mind overrides that benefit. So you've got to think of mind creates the changes in the brain, and the changes in the body that are either strengthening the environment of brain and body, or weakening. And if you cumulatively don't manage the toxic issues in your life, your body is slowly but surely changing, the brain-body environment slowly but surely changing in the wrong direction. So we move between this percentage of 35 to 98% increased in vulnerability to disease, the more we have an unmanaged mind.
So I have 2 questions. The first one I ask is about, what are the most important practices for first detoxing the brain? And then I want to talk about the mind afterwards. But what are the actual practices for detoxing the brain?
So the mind is going to do the detoxing. So the primary thing is that the mind detoxes. So the brain isn't self-generating, like genes aren't. There's a fancy terminology for it, but basically it means that the genes can't switch themselves on. The brain can't change itself, and we often hear in the media things like the brain can change itself. But if you did give me a dead brain and show me it changing, it doesn't change. But if I put QEEGs and fMRIs on you and I right now in this conversation, we'll see massive changes happening inside of our brain. So the first aspect is brain health is very reliant on mind health. And that is very primary. And so mind health is very much around keeping a messy mind managed. So I'm not sure if we spoke about this in the last interview, because we spoke about so much stuff, but how I explain it is that we've got a messy mind and a wise mind. And that's like and we can define each of those, but basically your messy mind it's experimental. Every moment is an experimental moment in the life of a human when you're awake, because you don't know what's happening next. We can't control people, events, or circumstances. So everything is chance that's coming up in the next few moments. We can predict to a certain level of accuracy of what's coming up. And the more familiar you are with an environment and people, the more accurate your prediction. But it's still a prediction. It's not an accurate fact. So based on that, we are very experimental. And that is okay. We have a neurobiology, mind, brain, body, is very geared to experimentation. It's very geared to hypothesizing. So we live a very hypothesizing type lifestyle. It's all happening very fast on the unconscious level. And so we hypothesize and experimenting, and we make mistakes, but that's okay, because in a mistake, if you're managing it, you'll take the messiness and you'll repair it and you'll grow. So it's kind of experiment, mess, repair, grow, experiment, succeed, don't, then you grow. And you're kind of doing this all day long in everything that you do, relationships, work, relaxation, sport, whatever. So that process is something that we are designed to go through. The problem is that brain health that'll bring brain health, and that'll bring body health, because it's mind, brain, body. But if we have a messy mind only, and we don't manage it, or we only manage it intermittently, it's because our mind's always working. It never switches off until you die. So it's working at night, you dream with your mind. You can even train yourself to dream differently. I mean, that's how powerful the mind is. You can, and I'm about to do a research experiment on that, where you can train your mind to train your brain to actually change things like nightmares and things like that, which is super interesting. Cool. So it's really interesting. So in other words, messy mind, messy brain, messy body. So that's really vital. So that would be the first thing. The second
messy
thing,
mind, messy brain, messy
body. Yeah. So it's
you can't detox the brain or Well, I guess you could detox the body a little bit by the physical environment, the substances you put in your body. But what I'm hearing you say is if you don't learn to detox the mind first, you won't get the optimal benefits of that environmental substances.
Exactly. So, for example, if you go and do a workout, but you go and do a workout with an attitude of, I just got to get it over and done with, or I hate this, or I wish it was over. And if you, never let yourself do that when you're working out, because as soon as you do, you send a message to every DNA, every part of every cell of your body to actually go into like almost like a freeze mode. You know, when people are starving and then their body hangs onto food. If you send that message to your body that you don't want to be here while you're exercising, you actually reduce your the DNA's functionality, and it drops down. Your benefit drops in the exercise routine. Wow. So you may be doing the most amazing workout, but your mind will determine the effectiveness and the benefit of the workout. So it's got to be mind, but we do have to eat properly. I mean, I've written books, Think and Eat Yourself Smart. I am an avid believer in eating healthy, and we can talk about that, real food and exercise every day. I've just come out of hot yoga 2 hours ago, and sauna, infrared saunas. I do it all. I do everything that I can do possibly, because I am looking after the organs through which my mind works. So I'm trying to create a very compatible relationship between them, because there's a magical relationship between them, which we've got.
Has there ever been a time where you've been studying this for decades?
38 years.
Yeah, decades.
Nearly 40
when you were like 6 years old, you started studying this. So was there ever a time during your intense research where you knew this, but you were practicing something different? Maybe you're eating clean and you were working out, but you were like, gosh, I don't want to be here, or I'm stressed out by this or my work or whatever it is. And you saw the negative effects of that. And then was there a time when you switched it? I'm assuming there was, and you never went back and you started to see other benefits.
Definitely. It's been up and down. I've always been very driven. So I've always been very into exercise and throwing myself into everything. So everything I do, I throw myself into 100%. But as I've gone through life experiences, I've got 4 children, and they're adult children, and that comes with its own incredible joys, but incredible challenges. And as you would know, and so there's been times where even like I've been married for 34 years, and we have an incredible marriage, but we've had our ups and downs. So whenever it's the relational stuff that's grabbed me the most.
Really?
And
it seems like relationships are the things that bring people the most joy and the most pain.
It's because we are enhanced by each other. And that's something we should talk about, enhancement versus competitive culture, and the whole deep, meaningful relationship thing. That is such a cool, incredible concept. And it goes beyond Darwin back to Lamarckian theory and that kind of stuff. But it's really, and it does impact. So to answer, it's a great thing to discuss. So in terms of, there's been like over the years business stuff and things, but I think the thing that's affecting me the most, where I find myself maybe working out at Orange Theory or something, and something's happened in a relational situation, and I find myself so absorbed with that I'm exhausted on the treadmill. I can't. So then I
focus. You don't have energy.
No.
Yeah.
And I'm just not able to do what I could normally do. So then I immediately will switch back and say, okay, I'm here now for myself, for this. I can't help others unless I'm actually building my own body up. And I discipline my mind, I catch it, push it back into that mode of totally focusing on what I'm doing. And it shifts completely. Suddenly I have all the energy in the world, and there's a difference. Yeah.
Is that part of getting rid of the messy mind?
It's managing the messy mind. We never get rid of our messy mind. We need to be friends with our messy mind. It's a very nice concept.
What is the messy mind? What is it? What's it feel like?
The messy mind is the experimental mind, as I was mentioning. So basically it feels like I don't know what I'm doing, or somewhat I'm kind of like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I don't know if this is right, if this is okay, if this is it's also things like someone says something to you and you react and you realize, oopsie, I said the wrong thing, or I misheard, or I made an assumption, or you see a pattern in your life where you keep on reacting to certain things, or you see that you're waking up in the morning complaining all the time. And that's messy mind. So it's where we find ourselves feeling discomfort, feeling like something's just not right, feeling ourselves irritable, worked up, all those emotions, those are messy mind, and those are totally fine. Now here, this is so fascinating, because those are fine if they're managed. So what we need to do is own them, give ourselves permission to experience them, because you cannot grow unless you understand what they feel like. So get irritated, I'm not saying choose to get irritated, but if you get irritated, own it, and then say, okay, well, why did I do this? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? That's a managed mind. That's what our psychoneurobiology is designed to do. We're not designed to be these perfect toxic positivity creatures. We are very normal. Yeah, we're not supposed to be these. It's okay it's way better to actually get frustrated and say, oh, I'm so sorry. I got frustrated because of, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it less next time or whatever. That's so normal.
What's the difference between toxic positivity and wise mind?
Okay, so wise mind is the ability to recognize I don't know everything. I need other people. I recognize I've hurt other people. I recognize it's okay to cry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be depressed. I recognize that anxiety, depression, these are signals. And when my body aches, that's telling me something. It's the wisdom to stand back and see another perspective. It's having deep discussions like this where you explore philosophy and explore. That's wise mind. It's if you ask me for advice on something, or I asked you for advice on something, and you gave me advice. Wise mind. When you talk to your kids and your partners or your friends, and you say, hey, this happened, what do you think? And they give you advice. Wise mind. So wise mind's in all of us, but we don't tune into it sufficiently. And it's at our core of our being. And we see this playing out in the neurobiology because we don't have any proteins. Let's take it from the organs to the cells to the parts of the cell down to the subatomic particles. We have nothing in our entire physical body and brain that is for toxicity. What we have is for managing it. So that's so different. So in other words, we have grace to make mistakes. And toxic positivity is all about that kind of almost putting a Band-Aid. It's like a Band-Aid on a wound. It's one of my friends says Band-Aid on a bullet wound. You can't put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. And that's what toxic positivity is doing. And things like gratitude statements and affirmations, if used incorrectly, are very much tools of the toxic positivity movement. But if you're not dealing with your issue, you can't just slap a positive affirmation on or a gratitude statement or practice. It's not going to do anything.
So how do
you're kidding yourself.
So should we use mantras and affirmations? Is there a way to use them in a positive way, an effective way, I should say? Or
definitely.
So
definitely.
how do we use mantras, tools, and affirmations, positive attitude, without it being toxic positivity?
I would do the way that I explain that is you do it in step 5 of the neurocycle. So the system I've developed for over 38 years, which is basically a delivery system for how to, it's not a technique, it's a delivery, like Amazon. Amazon's a delivery system that works brilliantly. Even if you don't like Amazon, it works. The system works. It delivers anything, anywhere, anytime. Then the concept of the neurocycle is a system of how we can directly manage our mind, or get our wise mind talking to our messy mind to direct the neuroplasticity of our brain to be able to then move in the right direction and accept the ups and downs of life and get that sense of peace, which is not toxic positivity. It's actually a sense of peace. It's an acceptance of the uncertainties of life and so on. So what I have found from my research is that if you have an issue in your life and there's something that you're battling with, so maybe it's just that you wake up complaining every morning or something. I'll take something like that because it was discussions recently I had with someone, and something I used to do. I used to wake up like worked up in the morning, and I got that under control, and it changed my life completely because it wrecks your brain, totally wrecks your brain, wrecks the day. And you can chat about that too in more detail if you want. But that's so what you've got to do is you've got to recognize that if there's something you're trying to work on. So let's say that there's a complaining thing, just by saying, okay, I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to say 10 gratitude statements instead of 10 complaining statements. That's going to work for a time. It will not be sustainable because all you're doing is slapping a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, or you're chopping the head of the weed and it will grow back. As we know, if you go chop the head of the weed, they will grow back.
So it's not getting to the root of.
Exactly. You have to find
why don't you just feel appreciation at all times, not try to act appreciation?
That's it. It's not a being, it's a doing. And so you've got to find out why. Whatever you're doing, there's a reason, because at your core, your identity is this wired for love nature in our neurobiology and in our mind. We see that in the love waves of the physics of the mind and the gravitational fields and things. We see that literally the quantum physics has shown us that we immersed in gravitational fields that are, and they change when there's negativity. So when people are angry and fighting, it's different. When there's a lot of war, you can feel it. You can walk into a room and you can feel that stuff. So essentially our environment is this is all very deep stuff, and it's all very real stuff too. And it's not something that we can ignore, because we all experience this. So you can't just go and say 10 gratitude statements. You have to find out why I am complaining. I'm showing up for a reason. There's a reason why I'm doing this. At my core, I'm this wired full of person. So if I'm waking up complaining, or if I'm always irritable in certain situations, or this triggers me all the time, or if I have certain patterns, there's a reason. Don't be hard on yourself. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace and just find the reason. And it's such an easier way, so much of an easier way to live, Lewis, than like beating yourself up or forcing yourself to be something else. Just say, okay, I wake up complaining. Why? And then go and solve it. And that's where you can then work through the process of solving it. And it's a very sequential time process. That's why there's 5 steps you do over time. And when you find the root, then you can do the positive affirmations. It becomes the step 5. Right. Then it works, because you're actually doing it in the right place.
What was the biggest challenge for you to overcome mentally with your messy mind that was holding you back? Something that took a long time for you to finally okay, I know the science, I know the research, I've been teaching this, but I still haven't been able to do this myself. What's that been for you?
2 things: the complaining in the morning, waking up very negative in the morning. And
how long were you doing that for?
Oh, for years. I remember it was like all through the first few years of my marriage. And I remember at high school too, I'd wake up in the morning on edge and anxious. And so for years. And I remember one day my husband saying to me, we'd been married for about maybe 10 years or something. And he turned around and said to me, you are always so negative in the morning. And he wakes up bright and happy and go away. You're too happy for me in the morning. It's like and he just said, you're always negative in the morning. And I didn't, until he pointed that out to me, I hadn't realized I was doing it. But it affected the first half of my day and would keep me in a kind of negative state. And I'm doing all this brain research. And as soon as I did the research, I'm like this, I would go into a high, because it immediately, as soon as my work immediately changed things, because it's brain building. And that's really important for mental health. Brain building is something that we definitely need to explore in this discussion, because it's phenomenal. Okay. Anyway, so complaining was set because it basically creates neurochemical chaos. Now, when you wake up in the morning, as you're going from sleep to wakefulness, there's a massive shift in neurochemistry and brainwave activity. And literally things that were flowing this way now flow that way. And the brainwaves that delta is very high, and now suddenly it drops down, and theta will change, and the beta comes on board. And so there's a whole shifting pattern. And if you don't manage that moment, you can set yourself up for failure for the whole day, or a miserable day. And everything just becomes so much harder. So it's just a matter of mind managing it. And I trained myself. It took me multiple cycles of 63 days using the neurocycle to train it. But it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. It honestly took me about, I think it was 2 cycles, if I stand corrected, 2 cycles. So it's 18 weeks, which is not that long if you think I've been doing it for maybe 20 years. Right. And the other thing that held me back, which I've been doing from a child as well, was if only. I used to say if only to everything. And I used to lose them.
If only I would have got this opportunity. If only this wouldn't have happened to me. If only whatever.
If only I said it this way. If only I did it that way. If only we had this much more time on this holiday. And one day, one of my daughters, and I've got 4 kids, and my second daughter, 3 of my daughters actually work for me. The one who's my producer, Dominic, turned around to me and she said, Mom, you are spoiling this holiday, because I was going on about all the if onlys as we were leaving the holiday. And it was once again, it took a person close to me to actually turn on and say, I wish you'd stop. And it was a child. I was like, gosh, I'm having this impact on my child. Wow. And I went into and that took me much longer, because I had been doing it for so long. And that was, even now on my, I have an app called the Neurocycle app, and it's on iTunes and Google Play. And it's literally me giving you therapy, taking you through the Neurocycle. I use that every day. I know the system off by heart, but I use the active reach reminders, because you can type it in. And every day, 7 times a day, still, it pops up on my phone. Remember your if onlys. So I no longer do it, but I still remind myself. And I now can just glance and remember, and I can catch myself like that. So I've become 81% more effective in managing something that was so toxic to my mental health that it has completely revolutionized my life. I cannot tell you how that's changed my life.
I can imagine when we come from a place of if only, what is that saying about us and our life?
that nothing will ever satisfy you.
Wow.
Nothing will ever give you peace. You will always be looking for the grass is greener on the other side.
Man, that sounds exhausting.
It's exhausting. You constantly can't see what you've got because you're always thinking what you just lost and
Where
how
does that
it would have
come
been
from?
better.
I
think a level of, once I did the work, it came from a desire to be perfect, perfectionism, which comes from a very poor identity, basically, and need to prove myself. I was the youngest of 4 kids. I had a pretty,
Me too.
okay. So I had my 2 elder sisters. My family are amazing, but like any family, every family has crazy things going on, which is very normal too. That's something that we all need to kind of realize. Obviously not the extreme stuff. That's not normal. But my 2 elder sisters were really battled a lot, and and I was the youngest, and I was kind of had to prove myself, and so I went out in every aspect, from academics to sport, and I was always the top academic and the top sports, and I drove myself to a point where it was just too much, and I was always trying to please. And my mom was very British and very, you don't compliment children, you don't give them a big head, you don't. So I remember going up to her as a little child, and she knows the story, so she's good with it, and we've talked this through, and I have a great relationship with her. But I was maybe 6 or 7, and I drew this picture, and I went up to her and I said, "Mom, don't you love my picture?" And she said to me, "That's vain. Don't ask me. Don't look for compliments." And it shattered me. And from
that's 6 or 7. That's tough.
Yeah, it shattered me. It completely. And she wasn't intending to shatter me, but it shattered me. From that day, I never asked. I just proved, and I drove myself, and it was never good enough. Nothing was ever good enough because she never complimented me. Wow. Now, as an 85-year-old, she never stops because she's changed and she's apologized. And she said, "I realized I didn't," because she started doing it to my kids and being hard on them. And I said, "No." I said, because she said, wow, you compliment your kids too much. I said, "You never complimented me enough." I said, "My kids, when they do something that's great, I am going to be their biggest cheerleader." And she saw that, and we had this whole discussion around that, but that's where it came from. And now it's sorted out. Now she makes a point of like everything. It's like really sweet now. She's trying to make up for it, which is great, because you can forgive and forget. You can't change what's happened to you, but you can change what's in you. But that's where it came from. And once I had made peace with that, it definitely, once my mom and I had that discussion, it freed me. It was definitely a massive part of my healing.
Wow. How impactful does perfectionism, or how impactful is perfectionism on the brain in holding people back? And how does someone let go of this idea to be perfect when they feel like maybe they had something similar with you, or they feel like that they need to be perfect to be loved or accepted or get acknowledgement or attention or affection or whatever it is? What does perfectionism do to the brain, and how do we let go of it?
That's an excellent question. It's very distorted because it goes against your natural wide flow of nature. Because when you are, and it's all to do with identity. So it's all to do with, and when we talk about identity, we've got to talk about it as a verb as opposed to a noun. It's something that's organic and growing. So you are Lewis, but you're constantly growing and changing from life experiences. When you're growing into yourself, and you're growing, and as we go through messiness and repair and growth, it's enhancing and growing and getting better and better all the time. And perfectionism is a sort of non-acceptance of that. It's like, I haven't had a chance to really see that my identity is good enough. And so it's like you've got to always do something. And there's something that's happened. It's generally, you can't, everyone's got their own narrative, but at some point in our lifetime, we've had something that knocked us. And it seemed to be for me that was where that knock happened. And so that, growing up in that kind of environment when there was never any compliments, and not, a child needs that sort of thing. So it affected my identity. I always felt like I had to prove myself in every instance. And it became a very big thing. I was like living for approval until I could accept who I was. So perfectionism, what it does.
You never accepted yourself, probably.
No, not totally. And and I think a lot of us battle with that. Identity is one of those I always recommend that people do regular identity checks, that you go and at least once a year you do a full-on identity check and just find out that you haven't been, because it's so easy to be shaped by experience and because it's nature, nurture, and I factor. There's the nature part of identity, that is, you have your genetic makeup, I have mine. You have your own unique way that your proteins vibrate. They don't vibrate the same way as mine. Even though we have the same brain structures, we have different protein vibrations and the way that our proteins fold. I mean, I held up this tree before. The thoughts that you build look like trees. The roots are the source, but the branches are your interpretation. So every listener listening to this now, they're hearing the same source, so the same roots that they grow in their brain, but every single person is growing their own interpretation, their own thoughts, feelings, and choices around the content we're talking about. And that's identity. So those are proteins, and the vibrations are different. So our wiring is unique nature-wise. Nurturing, we have our environment impacts us, whether we like it or not. Culture, religion, where we live, the philosophies of the day, all of that impacts us. But overriding both of those is the I factor. And that's your growing identity.
The perception we have of ourselves.
Yes.
So what we look like in the mirror.
What we look like in the mirror and how we perceive the world. And that is very malleable. It's very strong, but it's very vulnerable too. And it gets very very strongly influenced by nature, nurture. And that's why it's so important that we build an identity. So people that are confident, people that seem to get, like, no matter what happens, they just seem to bounce back. Even they will have identity issues, but they've reached a point in their life where they can bounce back quicker, maybe than someone else who's got more identity issues, who gets crushed. So for me, that was when I was still practicing, I would spend a large portion of my work with my patients on identity, because most of the time, their first would be the first sort of thing that I'd work on. And then I would do brain building, and then I'd do emotional work. So it would be to first build the person. You're amazing. This is how we get resilience in your brain. And you asked earlier on about how do we bring brain health. Brain building is one of the most powerful ways of using your mind to get brain health. And we never got to that point. So we need to do that
we'll
too.
Come back to that,
You better keep a note of all these things.
I've got the notes here. I'm curious about the identity check then. What does an identity check look like, and how do we build our identity to become more confident, resilient, loving, energetic human beings?
Absolutely. So when identity shatters, we'll see a difference in the vibrations in the brain. We'll see a difference in the energy flow in the brain.
What's the common ways it shatters? Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
A breakup,
nurture, environment, experience.
Something happens, a death in the family, something.
Those will shatter, but it's more when you are told you're broken in some way, even if it's not direct. So it's like if someone tells you, you've gone through an adverse circumstance and you're feeling depressed, and someone tells you you've got a brain disease, that will shatter your identity, because now your identity is, I'm broken. I'm a broken brain. I'm a useless person. Or if someone feels they're not valued, so a statement is made that the core of their humanity, who they are, is not valued. They're not valuable enough. We see this a lot with gender issues. People that aren't allowed to identify with what they believe their gender is. Tremendous attack on identity. That's why there's such an increase in suicides in that kind of environment. Generally, I've worked with a lot of suicide survivors and a lot of families of suicide victims, and who've experienced suicide in their family. And the core is identity, because if you don't feel you're valued, if you feel that what I can bring to the table isn't enough, no matter what, why should I even be alive? And that for me is so important. I did a whole podcast recently on identity and the importance of identity. And it looks different in the brain. When your identity shatters, your energy, we can pick that up on the QEEG. QEEG technology doesn't read detail. It's very crude, but it does give you an idea of the level of anxiety it creates. So when you're not being yourself, or you feel that you're not valued, we will see asymmetry, for example, in the brain. We'll see a lot of low energy in the front of the brain, very, very low energy in the front of the brain. We see it with people that have been labeled. Their energy, blood flow, it's asymmetrical, and it's very low in particularly this part of the brain. And then we have 200 specializations across our brain that are unique to each of us. So it's designed because your brain's only limited in size, your skull's limited in size. So you can't keep growing your brain. So you can't do everything, nor can I. So there's something you can do that no one else can do. And that's within these 200 specializations of our brain. But it creates a need, because Lewis says stuff you can do that I can't do. So therefore I need you, and you need me, because of what we can, because that's enhancement. And when people think, okay, there isn't something I can contribute, their identity gets broken. So we see that in those changes. And when you get that change in the brain activity and inflammation and blood flow, we're going to see an increase in the immune system, inflammation. The immune system will respond and react, because now your survival is threatened. So you're going to get inflammation. Then that has a downstream effect in your endocrine system. Then your telomeres and your chromosomes start getting shortened, which then ages your body. And I mean, it's I can go on and on.
It goes on and on, yeah.
The neurophysiological effects are enormous. So an identity check is critical, because the only way you're going to bounce back what is going to happen, because life is traumatic. No matter what we would love to know, we would love the world to be perfect. The reality is, no matter what, you've had traumas and you will have trauma. That's just, it's inevitable. So in order,
what does the identity check look like for you? You say you do it once a year, or?
Yeah, I do it once a year whenever I feel that I'm out of sync, where if I start feeling like, and a very quick recognition of identity check is if you're starting to feel envious and jealous of others, and if you're starting to feel that something that, that you're just not good enough, imposter syndrome, the typical, those are very key. That, hey, I must stop and do an identity check. So then I do it with a neurocycle. I'll go and look for I'll go and gather awareness of all the signals that I'm starting to see, like this. Okay, there's a lot more imposter syndrome than normal, because we all get a level of it, so it's okay. It's when it becomes an invasive pattern. So you look for the invasive pattern signals that are affecting who I feel about myself. And so I know how to recognize the general unease, and then you'll start working through from the signals, and then start reflecting what's happened. Ask, answer, and discuss with yourself what's happened to get myself to this point. And then I'll take time to write it down. The third and fourth step, it's describing the neurocycle now. The third and fourth step are writing. The third step you write in the form of a metacog. And a metacog is one of the most powerful things out there to get into your non-conscious mind and find out what's really going on, to really tap into the wise mind. You want to get your conscious and unconscious mind talking to each other. And if you go through these 5 steps that I'm describing, the neurocycle sequentially, you are training and forcing blood flow, those 200 areas of specialization, the different structures of the brain, the neurons, the neurochemistry, the endocrines. You are forcing it to actually work for you. You're kind of making all the ducks line up in a row, if that makes sense. Yeah. And when you're in that state, you're much more intelligent, you're much wiser, you have more clarity, you have more perspective. So that's the objective of the 5 steps, to really give you that level of clarity that can help you dive down deep into an unconscious mind and find the toxic issue that's caused this identity issue, because it's going to affect everything. Your identity starts shattering. It affects your work, your relationships, your
mood,
view of
your
life,
energy, everything.
Mood, energy, exercise, diet, everything.
So step 1 is reflection of your identity, is what it sounds like.
Very important.
A lot of these things. It's interesting you're saying this, because when I was younger, I've said this on the show a few times, but when I was younger, probably like 7, 8, 9, I would get, in elementary school, I would get in trouble a lot. Or at least this is the stories I remember. I remember getting in trouble and being sent to the principal's office. Maybe not that much. Maybe, I don't know, half a dozen times or something, right? In a couple of years. For whatever reason, acting out or saying something, and I remember kind of being scolded or being told that I was doing something wrong by the principal. And I remember saying vividly, like, I wish I were dead. Like, I just remember saying this as a kid over and over. Like, when I would get in trouble, I was like, I wish I were dead. And hearing you say this now, I feel like I just never felt valued. I'm sure people valued me, but I think I didn't know how to receive it, or I didn't feel it. And I think, thankfully, I never said that after those years, and I don't feel that anymore. But I remember, if I would have went down that path of never feeling valued for 5, 10, 20 more years, I don't know why I don't know why I'd still be here. I don't know why I wouldn't. I'd be building a case of what's the point of my life? Why should I be here? No one cares about me. No one values me. No one sees me. No one acknowledges me. I'm pointless. I'm worthless. I have no meaning, so I might as well end it. And so I have a lot of, I guess, compassion for people that feel that, because you can kind of get sucked into it, and you could easily get sucked into it from a major breakdown or breakup or heartache or something. You can get kind of sucked into this. Well, I don't matter if this person doesn't love me, and I don't matter if I'm not good enough for this job, and I don't matter. We can kind of get sucked in if we're not taking care of our mindset, from what I'm hearing.
I'm so sorry that happened to you. And it's you reflect so many people that have gone through that, and you managed to kind of adjust. But the fact that you could actually recall that incident shows you that it's still, maybe now there'll be more healing, but it impacted your life. And how many kids go through that? In fact, there was a post that I put up a couple of days ago, and I just happened to scan through, because you get so many comments. I try and read as many as I can, but I don't. But one caught my attention, and it was literally what you're saying now. It was someone saying how they were, as a child, told that, you're not good enough, and, you have a bad attitude. And it was just like, disciplining a child without, and what we don't realize is when you do that to a child, you're actually breaking them. And I remember my mom saying to me, again, my mom comes up with this thing, saying to me that when I would tell my kids, hey, listen, that's not right, but you do this right. This is the good, but this is what, and it's not you, but what you're doing. So it wasn't, and I was so emphatic on trying to, and I don't know if I did it every time, and I'd have to go ask my kids, but I really was conscious of not saying it's you that's bad, you're amazing.
This action that you did, the behavior is not good, but
yes, there's separation.
Yeah.
And I remember my mother watching me doing this one time, and she said, why are you doing that? Why are you telling them if they've done something wrong that they're good? I said, because they are good. They're at their core. They're just learning. They're just experimenting. If
you're constantly telling a child all the things they're doing wrong, they're going to believe they're wrong.
Exactly. That's the perspective that they're building, because you the adult in their life, you the caregiver, you're the person that they look up to the most, and you're shaping them. And so they're relying on you to model behavior. So if you are modeling back to them all the time that they are bad, instead of saying, okay, you're doing this, there's a reason why. And that's what I used to always do with the patients in my practice when parents and I was helping with behavioral, because I worked with a lot of adolescents that were behavioral, juvenile delinquents and that kind of thing. I'd always explain it like this. The way you turn up, or the way you are, what you're saying and what you're doing, are simply signals of an underlying issue. It's not the person. You can't say little Johnny is a behavior problem. That's a terrible thing to say, because you've shattered that child's and they'll just think, oh, what's the point? I may as well live up to what they're telling me I am.
There must be more of that. Yeah.
Exactly. So we've got to be so careful that maybe a person, oh, you're always so aggressive. When you say you always, you never, those you actually
you're building an identity.
Exactly.
You're shaping an identity, and the person's becoming more of that identity.
And you're not giving them any skills to change. So, but if you rather say to them, okay, what you've done is actually pretty aggressive. I know that's not who you are. Let's see why you did that, because there's a reason why you did that. And honestly, Liz, I cannot tell you how many times I've been saying this recently. We've got to give people grace. We've got to give ourselves grace. If someone in your environment or your work environment or your family are being impossible or difficult or whatever, instead of getting mad at them, remove yourself, create a boundary, but change your perspective. There's a reason. There's a reason why they're like that. So get yourself in a safe place that you can actually process it, and that you get your own mental health under control, and then go back in and try and say, okay, look, that really hurts me, the way you do this, but I understand that this is not who you are. Yeah. Can I help you, get through this? Is there something that's going on? And that shifts things totally. Because you're immersing people in kindness, which is something I did a podcast on recently. It changes, that kind of thing changes the way that the brain functions immediately in both parties, and you can get to the core issue. And that goes back to the child. You can do the same thing with a child. You don't have to then break their identity. So kids are growing into adulthood. There's so many bad behavioral issues that have come out of generations of bad parenting. And I'm much older than you, I think. I don't know how old you are, but I'm 57. How old are you?
I'm 38.
I'm 20 years almost older than you. Okay, so my parents parented me in a very different way, where it was very much, head ostrich in the sand mentality. Children are seen and not heard. Don't pull yourself together, get up and keep going, hide your emotions, don't show the emotions to the world.
That's so hard when you're developing a child brain that is developing. It's hard to
It's very, very
emotions.
Exactly. So I'm part of the baby boomer generation, and we grew up like this. And that's where you see a lot of issues in the baby boomer generation. And a lot of us have carried that on with our own kids. And hopefully, I didn't, because I recognize and I'm doing the work. Thank God I'm doing what I'm doing, so I could change that. But that has created a whole breed of people. And if we don't change that, we then impact the next generation and the next generation. So we have to, but yeah, you've got to be able to express yourself. And one of the things when I was working in therapy with doing a lot of family therapy, I would tell the parents that you've got to be authentic. You've got to explain, hey, I'm sad today. Mom's sad, and it's okay to be sad. And this is why I think I'm sad, and I'm working on it, and I'll be better. So you've modeled now for a child that you said, that child, if a parent is sad or worked up or irritated or angry or snappy, and you don't explain to a child, the child will immediately think, I'm bad. Their identity gets attacked. So if you don't explain to the child why their identity is affected, and then they think, okay, that adults are perfect. So a sad adult means that I'm the bad person, the adult's the good person. And that's the worst lie out. All of us are a mess, no matter what age you are,
Right.
adult or child. You just happen to be an older version of being a mess, and there's hopefully some growth. And what we should do is model authenticity and say, I am sad today, or I am depressed today, or yes, I yelled at you, I'm sorry, that was wrong, it's my bad, I did it because of this. So then you model to the child that say, oh, okay, it's okay if I get mad. Then they start saying, Mom, I'm mad because, instead of I am mad is my identity. It's not mad is my identity, mad's what I'm doing. So it's a doing, not a being.
It's interesting because this morning I woke up and I was feeling a little sadness and I didn't know why. And I remember thinking, okay, let me just sit with this for a minute. And I don't need to stay here, but I can be here and reflect on it. And I remember it was just kind of like chatting with a friend. I was like, yeah, I'm just kind of feeling sad. I don't really know why. Maybe I'm feeling like a little, I went through a transition in a relationship lately. And I'm like, maybe I'm, a little bit of sadness from that. And missing this experience. And I was like, okay, but there's a reason why the transition happened. And even though I'm grateful that, for the lessons and the process of moving on from this relationship, I can still be sad for the loss of something, something that's not there anymore that was there at one point. And so I just kind of sat with it for 20, 30 minutes, and I was like, okay, but I don't need to stay here, because staying in sadness is not going to support my joy, my authenticity, my vision of helping people. So I want to make sure that I don't reject these range of emotions, but I also don't want to stay in the negative, not a negative emotion, but the emotion that maybe will hold me back from helping people or having a positive attitude. So I think it's
so good. You just did. Sorry, I didn't.
Go ahead.
You just did a neurocycle. You basically
by
gathered
switching the language.
Yeah, you did. You gathered awareness of your sadness. You embraced it. You were okay with it. You gave yourself permission, and it's so good, because it's really okay to be sad. It's so totally normal. Then you reflected. So you gathered awareness. You then reflected on why. You maybe didn't do the writing steps, but you visualized it. So
I was talking with someone about it.
So you talk. So you did. So there we go. So there's kind of the writing. If it comes up again, you could maybe try and do a metacog, and you didn't get to finishing that. But the different types of writing just can take you deeper if you need to. But you basically did that as a visual discussion, and then you got into it. You reconceptualized it. You said, okay, there's a reason you're sad, the breakup, you're moving on, and then it's okay to be sad, because it's you grieving the loss, and that's part of it. And now you're moving on. And so your first step was you've accepted it, but now you're moving on. And you're quite right. That so you've given that sadness, you embraced, processed, and you reconceptualized. So you turned if you pushed it down, it would have grown, because whatever you suppress will get bigger, and then it's going to permeate other parts of your life. And then there's confusion, because you think, why am I sad when all this is happening? And then why am I feeling this? And it ends like a little virus, just starts spreading. And so you caught it there, and you allowed yourself, but you also limited. And that's so important with any emotion. No emotion is bad. Every emotion is telling us a story, but there's certain emotions that make us tired. Our brain, body, and conscious mind are limited in energy. The non-conscious mind is unlimited in energy. So the non-conscious mind will keep driving us to just keep going. So we have to discipline, or we have to literally create a discipline, almost like boundaries between the conscious and the non-conscious. So we have to so our wise mind is saying, okay, your wise mind said, if I stay in sadness, I'm going to get drained. You instinctively recognize. Exactly. So that was your wise mind telling you. So you put a cap and you put a seal on it. And I always say that with the neurocycle, when you're going through the process and you're working through a 63-day cycle, you sit for 15 to 45 minutes, not longer. And you limit, and you have an active reach, which is then what you did. You reconceptualize, and you said, okay, well, I'm moving on. I had a moment of sadness because I'm grieving what's happened, and that's okay. So if you're during the course of the day, if you found yourself going back to sadness, you can, instead of allowing yourself to go and revisit the whole transition, you can go to that statement, and you can build on that statement of, it's okay to be sad. I'm grieving a loss. And that's part of it. And then you move on. So you're training your mind to discipline itself, not to stay in something that will drain you, but to see how you made it work for you. Because you can't change what's happened to you, but you just change what happens in you. So you just did that. So good job.
Thank you. Yeah. I just feel like so many years of my life where I would stay in sadness, anger, resentment, what if statements, where I would just ruminate on these emotions for days, weeks, months, years. And it only left me with a lack of sleep, with stress, frustration, overwhelm, never feeling good enough, asking why me, all these things. And I never felt peace when I stayed in the emotion and I allowed it to consume me, as opposed to be a momentary or an hour thing, as opposed to days, weeks, months thing. So
you literally had to rewire your brain. Because we get into patterns of allowing ourselves to do that ruminating. And I can honestly relate to what you're saying. I did it too. And, as I've learned more and more and done more and more research in this area, yes, I've got an advantage because I'm seeing it directly with the research I'm doing. But it's just so freeing. You get so much mental peace when you recognize, okay, I'm in that state. And yes, you can have a concern in your life. You can have a concern that is, you're not just going to not think about a transition and a breakup. There's going to be a lot of time that you spend on that because it's different processing, but it's how you do it. Each little moment, is it a rumination on a hamster wheel, or is it a growth, a messy repair, hypothesizing messy repair? Are you moving forward? And that's what's so good, because if you get stuck like in the if only, like you said, and those negative emotions, we're creating so much neurochemical chaos in our brain and our body, and we're increasing inflammation, we're aging our body, we're just stuck doing everything we shouldn't be doing. And we don't have to. That's staying in the messy mind. The wise mind catches that and disciplines and trains it. But it's also not going to happen overnight. And that's where people in this technological age think, okay, well, I've done it once. Why am I still doing it? No, you're going to have to. It's going to take you probably 9 weeks. If you had to actually look at the time you spent to break that cycle, which meant that you rewired your brain, it would have, it's weeks. And if you have breaks in between.
Months or back in the day when I had to go through that,
Yeah, absolutely. Multiple cycles. And that's why.
What's interesting? It was like 8 years ago is when everything started to really shift for me when I turned 30. Because I don't know if I mentioned this in our last interview, but I've talked about it on the show a lot, where I started to truly address and heal the root cause of a lot of my pain, anger, resentment from sexual trauma that I went through as a kid, from other things that happened that I never expressed, that I never brought to the surface, that I always kept hidden with shame and insecurity and frustration and anger. And when I started to process the root causes of a lot of my insecurity and shame, that's when everything started to rewire. So if I would have just said, okay, I'm going to process these things on a surface level for a certain amount of days, I don't think I would have ever found that ability to create that peace within, because I was always holding on to some type of trauma that I was unwilling to talk about. Whether it was a big T or a little t, I was unwilling to talk about it out of shame. And when I started to share it, it was freeing. And I'm not saying everyone needs to share these things publicly or whatever, but just talking to a friend or a therapist or a coach, it was allowing me to start rewiring. Okay, I can process these heartbreaks or these tragedies or these moments in life that bring me stress and pain and grief and sadness. I now don't need to hold on to this pain from my whole life and add to it. I can process it and move on.
That's beautiful. That's amazing that you did that. And it's interesting that you did that around your 30s, and your 20s were fairly turbulent in terms of trying to suppress.
My whole life was turbulent, but until 30. I mean, still in my 30s, it's been some ups and downs, but I've been able to process, and I've been able to emotionally have more tools to experience and process and not hold on to. And I think I'm still learning, because I'm going to be learning for a long time. But
it'll be your whole life.
I'm definitely not perfect, because I still make a lot of mistakes, and I still stay in things longer than I should, and want to make sure I give it my all, and all those things. But I think I've gotten to a place where I know when to walk away from scenarios, as opposed to be the perfectionist, make sure I do whatever it takes to work. Like I'm like, okay, if this situation isn't supporting me or the other person, like at some point we gotta transition the situation. So.
Oh, that's incredible. And you've done so much incredible work then. You've literally, I can explain to you scientifically if you're interested in what you've actually done, because I think what you've gone through, the story you've gone through is, like, especially having the sexual trauma as a young, how old were you again?
5.
That's like, you think of it like this: as a 5-year-old, you look at your caregivers in your environment as your heroes, as your people that look after you. So the distortion is so absolutely, it's just such a distortion. So what's happened, if I use my toxic tree, and for those that are listening, I'm holding up the wiry toxic tree that represents toxic thought, as opposed to the healthy green tree. The roots over here, this whole thing's falling apart. I should pull the plastic off. The root part over here is the source of the pain. So that's the source of the trauma. So that's the actual events, all the data, the emotions,
the memories.
The memories. So a thought is made of memories, root memories and branch memories. And so the memories are all the things that actually happened and all the emotions that went along with it, the full data. As it's happening, simultaneously we interpret what's happening. And then if there's repeated patterns that happen, this part over here, the branches are your interpretation. So you said things like shame, and what were the other words you used? You used
insecurity, shame, anger, resentful,
and seeing yourself. Your identity was broken because you didn't see yourself as having value. All those kinds of things because of that complete distortion. Now, as a 5-year-old, you cannot process this. So this was the way you cope. This always is the balance to that. And even though this is a distortion, you do this to balance that. I mean, it's healthy, it's all great, it works out because the you-ness comes out. But here, this is all not the you-ness. So that would account for when you were at school, maybe you were called to the principal's office. A lot of those behaviors would have come from you not valuing yourself. And then if them coming in heavy again, just added more fuel to it. It was just another layer added
more
on.
Anger, more frustration, more, everything.
Yeah. So instead of them looking at why Lewis is doing this, they just told you were wrong and punished you. That would be the worst thing in your situation. And that would have just made it worse and worse. So then we push that down because we don't know what it is, what to do with it. And so you just keep going on and you just keep hoping for the best, and our kids just seem to be so resilient. But this is building and building. So in your non-conscious mind, these thoughts that we have, these experiences that we have are building through our mind into our brain and into our body and into our mind. So this is not only a thought tree in your brain, it's also in the DNA of every cell of your body. And it's in the gravitational fields of your mind. So it's in 3 places. That's why it's this whole psychoneurobiological impact. That's why it's this whole effect that it has on us. It's a whole body experience. So when you do things like EMDR therapy, did you ever do EMDR therapy or any?
I've heard great things about it. I haven't tried that yet.
So when you've done a bit of therapy over the years.
I've done a bunch of different therapies,
things,
emotional intelligence experiences and workshops, and
which have helped to pull the stuff from your body to your brain into your mind. So we work both ways. You get from body, brain, mind, brain, body, and your net kind of all works back and forth. But if these aren't dealt with, they get suppressed. And then maybe only when you're 30, like you said, then you started actually doing the work, or maybe during your 20s. I don't know when you started first remembering the trauma. I'm not sure what age you were at when you started facing that.
Every day I remembered the trauma. I thought about it, but it wasn't until 30 when I had the courage to start talking about it.
Okay, so it was in the. Okay, so what you had was the situation of some people completely hide and they don't even know what happened. Then it suddenly comes back. You were constantly.
I was always.
You were living it all the time. Okay, so it was in
daily, or maybe not every day, but at once a week I probably thought about it.
Okay, so this was constantly moving from the non-conscious to the conscious. So the awareness was increasing. So when we have increased awareness but no management and no processing,
there's got to be a way to get it out somehow.
Exactly. So it's coming up, but you're not processing. So it keeps coming up, down. Each time it goes back down stronger than before. And we see when you have increased awareness without processing, it increases anxiety in the brain. So if we had to scan your brain at that time, we would have seen a lot of red pockets of high beta energy across your brain, which would have made you be quite edgy, like looking for things to constantly like keep you busy, distractions on the go, whatever. I don't know exactly what you did over that time, but you may have been just always trying to, you said perfectionism, always trying to achieve. You're trying to prove yourself in a way.
Of course, constantly. Yeah, I mean, I threw it into sports, so I was just playing sports all day, practicing, trying to get better and achieve my goal.
And then that would have given you a lot of release of adrenaline.
Absolutely, anger, frustration, everything.
You channeled into the energy. So it's almost like you use that to cope, almost like an addiction, but in a sense, it was a coping mechanism, because addiction is not a disease. It's purely a coping mechanism. It's a coping signal that you're trying to deal with the stuff.
Of something that hasn't been healed yet.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Because 86 to 98%, 95% of addicts get out of addiction through choice once they are ready to do the work to find the root cause. So, so you channel for a time into that energy. You also got things like anandamide being released in your brain, which would have given you the bliss hormone, would have given you a sense of excitement, and you would have had dopamine rushes and all those things that were being drained. So this was draining all of that. So you're doing sport to put it back, but eventually it explodes. So it's like a volcano. If you think of a volcano,
well, then sport ended. So I was like, well, now what? Channel my energy. That's when everything started to come to the surface, where I was like, oh,
you got to deal with this now.
I'm not liking my personality in these scenarios when I'm feeling triggered, and people aren't liking my personality around me, and it wasn't fun anymore to be around me for a year or two, when I was like, really? I don't know how to express myself. I know happy and angry. Like, I don't have a range of emotions. Like, how do I learn how to express? And I think and I empathize for a lot of humans, but I mean men in general who are kind of built and raised in the same type of dynamic. I'm like, it's when you've never been taught how to express yourself without being shamed, without being made wrong, without being like, don't do that. That's not okay. You can't show this emotion. You're supposed to be a man, or this, or whatever it is.
Toxic masculinity.
For women as well. Like, you need to be this, this, and this, and you can't do this. It's just a challenge, because then you're always suppressing something.
It's always suppressing, and you have to go back and that's volcanic in nature, because like a volcano will bubble, eventually explode, and the lava will pour out. That's what these eventually do. They eventually, and it did explode, as you've just described. It was exploding in your behavior, where it was now becoming very in your face, and in people's faces, and that was then signal. So all of those behavior patterns, the emotions, the behaviors, the perspective on life that you had, the physical sensations in your body, those were all warning signals that your body was trying to restore balance. So your non-conscious mind was trying to draw your attention to the fact that you need to identify the source. Your immune system was sending out all kinds of signals to this actual physical experience in your brain, this physical thought in your brain, your body, trying to get rid of it. So it's trying to eject and get rid of this thing that's causing the imbalance, and it comes out in our emotions and our behaviors.
Well, it also comes out physically. I mean, I was going through a challenging scenario where I knew a relationship that I was in needed to end, but I was staying in this certain relationship for longer than it needed to be, and I started to get. I never in my life have had this, but I started to get like eczema breakouts on my skin in different parts of my body, and I was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Never had this in my life." I started doing all the allergy tests. I had no allergies. I was like, maybe I'm having too much almond butter or freaking, I don't know, gluten. What is it? Dairy?
What is it? Yeah.
Eliminating all these foods, nothing is changing. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm just going to live with this forever then. And okay. And literally, I kid you not, once the dynamic of the relationship shifted and transitioned, my body it's going away. And I was just like, this is crazy. Like, the physical symptoms is gone. This eczema outbreak or whatever, which I thought was going to keep spreading all over my body, it's now gone. And it's crazy when we, like you're saying, we need to be aware of the signals. We need to be aware of the emotions, the feelings, the frustrations, the thoughts, the sadness, the anger, and be aware of them. And we also be aware of our physical symptoms.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Am I drained? Am I emotionally tired? Am I frustrated and triggered all the time? Do I have eczema? Is my hair falling out? I don't know. Whatever. Am I losing my vision? Something. Am I getting heart palpitations? Like, you've got to be noticing the physical symptoms as well from the emotional stress.
Exactly. That is so important what you've said, and fascinating that you've got, that you've highlighted a key psychoneurobiological link. And in my most recent book, the Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, that one that you interviewed me about last time, there I talk about some of the things. I didn't put my whole clinical trial, but I talk about some of those impacts. But there's so many studies around the link between unmanaged mind and unmanaged stress and the impact on our body. So it's directly like this. You were going through this relationship that was not good for you. You hadn't dealt with these issues yet properly. So that combination was your mind was an unmanaged mess, and that would generate a lot of basically toxic energy waves, gravitational fields, electromagnetic fields, literally through your brain and your body. So therefore, nothing you would have had too much high gamma, too much high beta, probably not enough oxygen and blood in your brain, constricted blood vessels around your heart, all things that the immune system would have been autoimmune, because that's eczema is an autoimmune response. Everything was, so we've all got genetic weaknesses, and generally when we're under toxic stress, and it's come through the generations, it just happens, it's mutations that happen through generations, and they're dormant and they're activated, and the mind is the activating factor. So it manifests in so many different ways. So definitely you've hit the nail on the head. You go for the allergy test, it's not the allergies, because we immediately think purely physical, but the physical is dominated by the mind. The physical, you can't have eczema if you're dead. You can only have it if you're alive, and generally if it's not a food allergy, there is a mind, an undealt with
mental
adverse.
allergy.
Exactly.
The mental
That's
allergies.
Literally mental allergies. These are literally mental allergies, and they threaten your survival. So that eczema was your body saying, hey, Lewis, please pay attention. There's something in your mind that you need to deal with. And it's
interesting because, I take full responsibility for my thoughts and staying in something that I know I'm not supposed to stay in something, or for not speaking up, or for abandoning myself. As I reflect, and throughout the entire time, I'm in no place to blame someone else. I take responsibility. Take responsibility for, what am I doing to be a co-creator in this? What are my thoughts doing to manifest this physically? And how am I responsible for choosing something different? And it might be a hard decision. It might be a courageous decision that I've been afraid to make, but that's the one my body is telling me you need to make, or you need to shift. You need to shift something. You need to shift something within this relationship experience. You need to, whatever it might be.
Something.
And I think a lot of times people will blame others for their feelings, their emotions, their physical manifestations of their mind. And maybe they're a part of that experience, but you can't blame someone else for the way you're thinking and you're feeling, or can we?
You've hit the nail on the head. You can't, there's two parts to that answer. Our environment affects us. Yes. So when you were abused, you were a victim. There's no lesson to be learned in that victim, that what you went through as a victim. There's only healing that needs to take place. And that's what you are responsible for, is your healing. And that's always sounds so hard when someone's been sexually abused, to say that you're responsible for your healing. But
no one else can heal me.
No, people can support you. That's the difference. And that's that whole enhancement culture. We need each other. So you need someone cheering you along. You need the therapy, the coaching, the counseling, whatever version of that, whatever combination of that. But you also need to know how to manage your own mind, because at the end of the day, you're not in therapy 24/7. You're not in coaching 24/7. People go to sleep. You're awake at night. You wake up with your mind. You're sitting with your anxiety, your thoughts. What do you do? So mind management becomes absolutely essential in us being able to cope with anything that we've gone through. And yes, that is we can't change. I keep saying it. We can't change what's happened to us, but we can change what's happened in us. So that abuse that you went through, there's never anything that can excuse that, and there's no lesson to be learned, and you were a victim, and that person was wrong and needs to be, and person or persons, they need to be punished, and those are facts. But for you to be disengaged from that is extremely important. And the only way you can disengage from that is through embracing, processing, and reconceptualizing. So it's a deconstruction, reconstruction process. Otherwise, you keep this in your brain, and this drives you and it controls you, like it did for so many years. Every day, this was controlling you, coming up and controlling you. So until you did the work which you did to start recognizing those signals, the physical signals in your body, the eczema, whatever it was at that time, the heart palpitations, gut issues, the emotional signals, depression, anxiety, panic, frustration, whatever, worry, the perspective signals. How are you looking at life? What is your general view of life? And then also looking at which one have I left out? The physical, emotional is 4. Emotional, physical, perspective, and why am I blanking on the 4th one? There's 4 different areas that we look at. It'll come back in a moment.
Sure.
So once we gather awareness of those signals, then what we do is we can then start, once we've gathered awareness, we can then start doing the reflection, the why. But you've got to do it very sequentially. You've first got to pay attention. So the signals are warning signals, they're clues. So you become a detective in your own life.
Well, why is this happening? Okay, let me start doing some experiments, get some tests done, and realize, I'm eliminating this, I'm eliminating that. Then where's the root cause?
of that thing. So you've got to start there, but you've got to start with your signals. So these are the 4: emotional, what you're doing, behavioral, physical, what's in your body, and perspective. Okay, so emotional, physical, behavioral, and perspective. And you've got to find those first. As soon as you're aware, you then pull this up and you change 1,400 neurophysiological responses in your brain and your body. You shift the resilience of your brain and you start now enabling yourself to be stronger to face that stuff. And your mind, brain, and body know it's going to be hard, because treatment and healing is awful. It's hard. It gets worse. I put a case study in my book of one of the subjects who was in the beginning of the study. They literally said, "I am depression." That was their identity.
Wow.
And all they could describe.
I'm depressed. I am depression.
I am depression. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I am depression, and I can't sleep. My life, just the whole narrative was just everything that was terrible. They had tried everything, every drug. They were at the end of their rope. By within 21 days of mind management, they were no longer saying, "I am depressed." They were saying, they were no longer saying, "I am depression." They were saying, "I am depressed because of." And that is major. And then they said, so this is now, they understood now, they were saying depression is a signal. It's telling me something. Then they said something so interesting. They said, "I'm even more depressed and even more anxious than I was when I started the trial." And I said, "Yeah, that's a good thing, isn't it?" They said, "Yes, because the depression and anxiety is different. Because the depression and anxiety shows me I've done the work, because now I know why I was depressed." They had suppressed for nearly 30 years. What had happened was also sexual trauma and a lot of physical abuse. And it had been so bad that they pushed it down and completely obliterated it from their memories. And that was coming up. So that just remembering what happened made them more anxious and more depressed. But it was a different it was a controlled depression. It wasn't a depression of, I'm hopeless. I can't do anything. There's no meaning. It was, I now know why I'm depressed, and this is what I can do. And then by 63 days, because it takes a full 9 weeks to start changing behavior, they were sleeping again. They were able to get back to work. They were able to start seeing, okay, well, I found this part. Now I need to go back in and find this part and this part and this part. So there was now a plan in place for managing their mind and knowing what to do during the day when it hit them. That terrible, and you can probably relate to this, that terrible, like how it grips you, that sadness or that anxiety or that panic attack out of the blue, just an all-consuming, or someone just says something to you that looks at you funny and your whole identity is shattered. Yeah. And you're triggered. So that is key. And that is why we've got to we've got to think, if we've been thinking a certain way for so many years because of an experience or an accumulation of experiences, you're going to have to do the work of unwiring it. And to unwire, you have to get control. So by gathering awareness of your signals, which is the very first step, you are then bringing this into the conscious awareness and you weaken it. And that's really key. And I'm holding up the wiring tree for the listeners. You then weaken the toxic thought. As soon as you weaken the toxic thought, you have now got agency or control. You still feel depressed. You still feel confused. You still feel all those things, but there's a shift. And the shift is that now you are taking control. You're empowered. And Lewis, I used to tell my patients, get 2 chairs, put 2 chairs next to each other, sit in one, and that's the wise mind. And the other one is you, messy mind. And you are talk to yourself and use the pronoun you, and give yourself therapy and create an environment that you would love, which is kindness, grace, acceptance. And it's okay. Everything you do, and you keep telling yourself, you really are at your, I always give them the science of saying, listen, neurobiologically, you're wired for love. Your mind is an optimism bias. When you feel this negative toxicity, this is simply your body trying to restore balance. There's nothing about you that's bad. It's what's happened to you that's an adverse circumstance, and you've just tried to cope. So your behaviors are simply coping signals. So when you keep telling yourself that, and then you work through very systematically through the 5 steps, you're getting more and more control. You're using mind-directed thinking to direct the neuroplasticity of your brain that changes. So you rewire your brain slowly, and it's not a quick process. It's a slow, deliberate process over 63 days. So in the first 21 days, it's 15 to 45 minutes. Then the second phase of 42 days, you're just going to spend 1 to 7 minutes. And that cycle, and I've tracked this now all with brain studies and blood and DNA, and I've used so many different levels of studies, and we're busy publishing all these papers at the moment, but there's a summary in the book, and I've got a white paper on my website, and we're doing a national study now. But what I wanted to show people was that taking this attitude, this kind of picture I've just painted of what you did with yourself, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm just giving you more specifics. You are actually directing the neuroplasticity of your brain. You are taking this toxic tree, you are deconstructing it, you're taking the energy that is vibrating in those branches, holding your interpretation of yourself, which is not the truth. You're taking that trauma that happened to you and you're changing all of that. And energy is never lost. And this is all energy in these proteins. And it's only transferred. So you're taking that slowly every day and you're transferring, and this is getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker, and you're building a healthy reconceptualized version. So by day 21, you've got this beautiful healthy green tree. Now watch, I'm going to pull a part of it out. I'm pulling a tiny little piece of it out. There's a little piece of green that I'm holding. That is that converted into this. It's now shrunk into a green version, which is your very terrible, sad story, which still makes you sad, still makes you cry. Should never have happened, but it did happen. But you've now changed what it looks like in you. It's no longer this toxic thing that's causing your immune system to send out T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes and macrophages and treat it in the same way as the COVID virus, which is damaging your brain and body, whatever. It's literally the same thing it's not the same as COVID virus, but it's also protein. So it's recognized as a threat to survival by the immune system in the same way COVID virus is. And you've changed that. And now no longer is it a threat to your survival. You now have a new coping mechanism. So you remember why. So when you're triggered, this is what you revert to, not that toxic tree. But to get to the point where you revert to this, the green tree, you have to do that extra 42 days of work because habits only form in those cycles. And I'd have patients, Lewis, that would sometimes take 2 years to get to the point where they were kind of had sorted out all this stuff. Some people will do one cycle, there's no cookie cutter, anything. This is not a technique. All I'm giving you is how you get your mind under control so that you can unwire these things and rewire them. And it's different for everyone's narrative.
Yeah.
But you can do it. It's hopeful. We can do this, and it's hard work, and it's difficult, and it's traumatic, and you need support. And there's times where you're going to get so depressed where you maybe can't get out of bed for a few days because of just the awareness of what's happened. But you will keep. That's all progress. And I remember having patients that were had gone from suicidal to ups and downs to seeming to cope to back together, then suddenly crashing into deep depressions, and then everything is progress because at every stage there's another level of awareness, and then getting to the point, okay, I can cope, I can move forward now, I can start, which is what you did.
Right. Yeah.
You've done that. Now you've channeled all that energy into helping others.
It's all a process. It's all a process, and there's always going to be new lessons to learn, I'm assuming. And
oh yeah, it's that messy grow. It's that messy. Repair, grow, messy, repair, grow, messy. Right. Give ourselves permission. It's okay to be messy. It's okay to be depressed and anxious. It's not an illness. You're not a broken brain. You are just, those are all signals. Be Poirot, be Sherlock Holmes. Be your own thought detective.
There's so many things I want to make sure we go over still, but I want to go into relationships in a future episode, in a future interview. So if you want us to. So leave a comment on the YouTube channel and just put #relationship if you want us to do another interview about the brain connection in intimate relationships and how that affects our mood and energy and all those things. I think it'd be fascinating. So leave a comment there if you guys are interested. I want to go over brain building. I also want to go over what you do for the ultimate mindset training in your morning and evening routine to set yourself up for success for a day. But I also want to go back into identity check and
we didn't quite finish that.
Figure out what do you do when you are checking your identity, and how do you reprogram your mind to build confidence in your identity moving forward?
Okay, so where do you want to start? There's 3 things there.
What do you do when you're doing a
identity check?
What are you doing personally? What does that look like?
For me, okay.
Start there.
So I tune into, once again, the signals. So I'll be going along and I suddenly notice, for me, I've got certain key signals that tell me I need to do an identity check. One is imposter syndrome. When I start feeling like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be talking about what I'm talking, I don't even know what I'm talking about, kind of thing, then I know that that's nonsense because I've got 38 years of research and I know what I am, and I don't know everything, but so I have to. So as soon as I start feeling like that I will say, okay, that's, and I watch it. Then I watch. So I watch for imposter syndrome. I watch if I start getting perfectionistic, if I'm feeling like this obsession to be perfectionistic. If I start feeling, if I like maybe hear if I start feel little bursts of, it's not like jealousy or envy or bitterness. If any of those, I mean, I own it all. I'm not scared to tell people if I have those, because it's so normal to have those. What's not normal is to keep them. I'd never see imposter syndrome, perfectionism, jealousy, envy. I never see those as evil, terrible things and I'm now a bad person. I only ever see myself showing up as those because of something. And so those are my key things. If I start feeling twinges of envy or jealousy or imposter syndrome or perfectionism, then I know, okay, so there's, and then I watch. Is there a pattern? How often am I doing it? Is it daily? Is it weekly? Is it just now and then? If it's now and then, I'm okay. But if I see, okay, hey, this is happening daily and I'm being triggered by everything. So I look for frequency. So I know my signals, then I look for frequency. Then I say, all right, now it's time. This is happening way too often. I need an identity check. I need to sit down, and then I will actually sit for 63 days every day. And I do it while I'm always working on something. So if I see it's an identity check, I'll finish whatever I'm working on, and then I'll start. And I always do my neurocycle for anything when I'm getting ready in the morning. It's just the routine I've set up in my life. So it's so then while I'm getting ready, it always takes me about half an hour or so. So it's great time. No one comes in the bathroom that everyone knows. That's leave mom alone. That's leave me alone. That's when I have my space. So I have a routine. So then I'll start with, let's say it's day one. I'll say, okay, those are, I'm seeing I'm doing imposter syndrome. I see the 4 signals. Then I break it down. Okay, what are the emotional signals? What are my feelings? So I'm feeling a bit of envy, a bit of jealousy, a bit of frustration, whatever. Then I'll say, okay, behavior. What am I doing? I'm definitely not smiling as much. Maybe, so I look at my behaviors. I seem to be a bit short. I'll keep talking about this. It's coming into conversations. People are actually commenting, why do you keep talking about this? So I look at my behaviors. So emotional warning signals and behavioral warning signals. Then I will look at my body. I'll sense my body. What's different? Wow, I'm getting more gut aches. My gut, we have such a genetic weakness in our family with gut, very common. I'll notice that foods that don't really make me bloat, suddenly I'm bloating more. I'm suddenly getting incredible cramps in my lower colon. I know immediately there's a certain pain that I get in my colon that is related to emotions. Oh, man. I get tremendous pain in my heart when I'm very toxically stressed. Like it really feels like pain. It's sore. I can feel the pain. Oh. So I notice those things. So I'm very aware. Then I'll look at my perspective. And my perspective is, why am I doing this or something? So it's kind of in a negative, it's moving to a negative zone. So I gather those, but I gather them, Lewis, like I'm gathering apples in an apple orchard. So I literally will do, I do. I literally, in my mind, I am 2 chairs. I'm using the you language. I'm very kind to myself. I'm very accepting. I set myself up correctly. So my whole mindset going into, even before I gather those 4 signals, is one of, it's okay. You really are amazing. There's no one can do what you can do. So a little bit of, motivational boosting, but I'm also kind to myself. It's really okay. It's really not, you're not the first person who've done this, to feel envy or jealousy. This is not that you're a bad person. There's a reason. So I just remind myself of those things. There's a couple of little prompts. That changes my neurophysiology. I know from the science that I've done that I've now got 1,400 neurophysiological responses working for me. Just before I start the process, I'll do a brain preparation. And in my app, I actually do this. I physically walk you through audio, video.
What's the app called again?
Neurocycle. It's called Neurocycle. And it's on, and I've got one for identity in there. So it's the whole 63-day process. I literally give you therapy. And then we have mini neurocycles. It's a mini neurocycle guide. So like if you're feeling imposter syndrome, you can press that. I'll give you a neurocycle. Identity check. I do. Anxiety,
that's
whatever.
Cool.
So it's really cool. We're growing it all the time, and I'm building in a neurocycle lab so people can actually get coaching and get coached through different issues, which is fun. So then I'll do a bit of brain preparation. So I set myself up, the kindness, all that stuff, and then I'll do a bit of brain preparation. I love to do the 10-second pause. I write about that in my book, and that's just a very common breathing technique, but I do it with quite a lot of difference. I breathe in very deeply for 7 counts, 3 counts. It's very deeply, like the yoga kind of breathing where you really move your belly, Wim Hof type, breathe, where your chest is, and then you breathe out for 7 counts. But it's also that sort of yoga type breathing where you push. You've got to really whoosh it out. The extended exhale pushes oxygen to the front of your brain and blood flow to the front of your brain. So I almost have to shake my head because I feel lightheaded. So that's how intensely I do it. Then I'll do the first couple just breathing. Then I add a cognitive dimension, and I start saying, think, feel, in the inhalation and then choose in the exhalation. And I do it out loud. So I add in the verbal component to the actual physical. So now I've coordinated, I've created not just a physiological response, but I've brought mind, brain, and body. I've brought all three responses together. So I've calmed down neurochemistry, I've calmed down blood flow, I've increased blood flow to the brain. I mean, I can go on and on and on. I've just given my telomeres a boost, which are the ends of chromosomes. I mean, it's just my immune system's now primed. I've given my whole body the message, it's okay. You don't have to be now making stress work for me and not against me. So even my blood vessels around my heart would have dilated, and that I would have got more blood flow to my brain. So immediately I'll feel less pain in my heart, immediately, because I've now calmed my whole body down. Because that pain that I feel in my heart is coming from the trauma that's in my mind, the identity trauma in my mind. Anyway, so then I go into the 5 steps. And then I'll go gather those things like I told you, the 4 different areas, emotional, physical, behavioral, perspective. Then I go very distinctly to step 2. And the gathering is like picking apples off a tree. So I don't go stand under the apple tree and just let all these things fall on my head. That's totally overwhelming. I stand back. So visualize yourself standing back and selecting. And I do what I can on that day. Sometimes I can only pick maybe just envy that day, and maybe just not smiling as much, and maybe just perspective seem that I seem to be a bit down or negative, things that I'm not as hopeful, because I'm a very kind of positive, hopeful person, but it's not there. So maybe I could just handle a bit. I don't force myself to do too much on one day. And then I'll go to, once I've gathered, then I take each thing and okay, now I'm going to reflect, ask, answer, discuss. What does this mean? Why? And I discuss and ask. So I'm starting to find the meaning. Then I'll write it down. So either I do it in a metacog, and a metacog I started talking about earlier on. A metacog is a way of organizing information that looks like a tree. I mean, literally. Like a tree grows branches and another branch and another branch. Every branch is connected to something else. You grow branches on a piece of paper, and on each branch you write a word or a couple of words or a little phrase. But nothing's floating on the page. This is so important. And you start in the center and you just build. You can either go clockwise or anti-clockwise, whatever you want to do. You can keep it all clockwise and turn your page, whatever you want. Lewis, I developed a system about 38 years ago, and I've constantly improved it. I would do this with my patients. I would work with people, for example, with personality disorders, and using the metacog technique, they would be able to see the different personalities and reintegrate them and find the trauma source and that kind of stuff. To get your conscious mind working with your non-conscious, to find all the trillions of thoughts that are in your non-conscious mind where they're stored, to get that depth, because your conscious mind is only working when you're awake, but your non-conscious mind is working 24/7. So it forces these 5 steps going into the metacog, which is the 3rd step, force this integration and this connection between the conscious and the non-conscious. So then I start writing down what I've gathered and what I've reflected on. But in this metacog, so it's a mess. It's just like words all over the place, and you literally vomit it on your page, and you start seeing things that you can't believe that every time I do it, I'm astounded at what I see. Then the 4th step is a recheck, and I'll go and sit down and I'll take color, and I'll look at what am I saying here? What does this mean? And I try and get order. I look for triggers and patterns and antidotes. Big thing is antidotes. That's reconceptualizing. You said that's an antidote or reconceptualized statement earlier on when you spoke about this morning the sadness that you felt, and you said you gave yourself permission to feel the sadness, and your antidote, your reconceptualized version was, it's okay, I'm feeling sad because this is a transition in my life, and it's okay to feel that. And then you moved on into the day. That's what you look for in step 4. You look for what is the antidote? Yes, you're feeling this because of this. And you start, so as you go through those stages, you start seeing the reasons why, especially step 3 starts pulling that reason, the root of why I have this identity thing. And you start seeing, wow, I thought I had dealt with that, but I haven't. This is still an issue. I still need that approval because of this. Why do I need that approval? Do I really? And then you start saying, actually, I don't because of this. So step 5, then that builds into step 5, which is then a little statement that I'll hang on to for the day. And that's where your gratitude statement or your positive affirmation or your whatever, a summary of what you've achieved that day. It could be as simple as, okay, my identity's been knocked. I'm feeling this envy. It's okay to feel that. And maybe that's your statement. It's okay to feel this. I'm finding the reason why. And that may be all that you do. So in the app, I would type in, it allows you to type in your active reach reminder. You set it to go 7 times in the day, because there's research shows that if you can see something consciously be prompted 7 times at least during the day, you then are putting energy to the positive and taking it from the negative. And so you're transferring, you're weakening this, and you're getting the healthier one stronger. So you're weakening the toxic, making the healthier one stronger. So I'm now re-energizing, and I'm disciplined big thing is disciplining my mind, not to go back and give energy to the toxic pathway, but to actually take energy from it so it weakens. So I'm allowing grass to grow over the worn pathway. And that's what I force myself to hang on to. That's all I allow myself to think of the rest of that day. I always like to have a visual as well. I love white roses, and I love the sea like most people do. So I'll have some image. So it'll be, it's okay to feel envy, there's a reason, and then I'll imagine white roses. So each time my mind wants to go back to this imposter syndrome, this identity, this lack of value, whatever, I say it's okay to feel envy, white rose, and then tomorrow I'll go further. And that's how I do it. So over 21 days I will do that, and then for 42 days I'll just go with my final active reach. And I find that I do a big one like that at least once a year, but if I need to do more, I do more. And sometimes all I need to do in between is a quick 5-minute cycle. Oh, hang on, there's a bit of an identity thing here I can run through, and I remind myself. So in the course of the year, I probably do 5 or 6 times a year, if not more. Does that help?
It's massive. And I think identity check is something I feel like all of us should be doing. And
all the time.
Constantly adjusting and improving on, because what I'm hearing you say is our belief around our identity is what shapes a lot of our mindset.
Oh, absolutely. And then what you're going to say and what you do. So what you'll do is, once your identity is sorted out, once I do that kind of identity check, the big one and then the little ones in between, I'll immediately shift in my day to looking at something differently. So now I see something that I think
perspective changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So something that I think I should have achieved in my business, and I'm not achieving it, and I compared myself to someone else, I suddenly look at that and say, no, I don't need to compare. I'm now enhancing. So I shift from comparison and competition, which is totally toxic. It's not at all human nature, and back to enhancement, which is, oh gosh, that is amazing what that person is doing. Wow, I love that for them, and I mean it. And I'm so excited. Now, I enhance them. How does that enhance me? What can I learn, or what works for my life? What do I have? What do I need that exact thing? I can't have that exact thing, because that's that person's thing. That's what they've got. That works for their life. I can't use my measure of success against their measure of it. So I tell them, we know all of that, but you're not going to believe those words. We're very good at saying words that we don't believe. An identity check takes the words that you're saying that you believe. We're very good at saying the kind of statements I've just said that we don't actually believe. And we try and convince ourselves. That's the Band-Aid approach. That's the positive affirmation approach. So I know when I'm saying those statements and I don't believe them, I know I need an identity check. If I can say those statements and I'm genuinely throughout my entire mind, brain, body, if I'm entirely, totally happy for that person's success, and I'm not thinking, wow, I want it. If I start thinking...
Give me an example of like feeling jealous or envious about someone else and saying I'm happy for them, but not feeling it and believing it.
So let me think of something. So it's a whole body check. So there's been times where I've said, oh, I'm so happy that person got a New York Times bestseller. Yeah. And then I say, hey, but I can feel my body's not, I'm out of alignment here. Then I have to go and do a little identity check, and I do it in a quick neurocycle in a minute. Then I'll say it again. Okay, I really am genuinely happy that they got a New York Times bestseller, or they got on the whatever, Published Weekly, or whatever the case may be. And then I check my whole mind and body, and I can feel, actually, yes, I do. It's true. There's a whole, like an alignment that I feel different, and my body feels different. It's like I'm relaxed, and I'm excited, because I now feel that I can see that their success is their success, and that enhances me. Whatever someone else succeeds in is only to my benefit.
Why is that?
Because that generates, they're operating in something that they can do that no one else can do. So if I celebrate that, they're generating a whole bunch of success energy and love energy that's going to hit me and build me up. So and then I in return am building them up. So this is Einstein's work. Not that he spoke directly about it like I'm speaking about it, but he spoke about he worked with a few people on how we generate photons. And there's been tremendous advances in that work, and especially in the field of quantum physics. So if you're genuinely happy for someone else, you're going to generate photons. We always when you're alive, you're generating energy. You and I are generating energy now, even though we separated technologically, we impacting each other. We've got a relationship going through our connection, etc. So we entangled. So we're impacting each other. So, and it's positive, because we're discussing positive things. But if you have a toxic relationship with someone, the photons that have been generated are toxic. So toxic energy waves, the electromagnetic light waves are toxic. They're different. And they can see that with research now. So that's the example of that, is if you walk in a room and you know people don't like you, you can feel it. Or if someone's like can't look you in the eye, and you just, the way they're kind of smiling, but you just know there's something wrong. You can cut the atmosphere with a knife. That's what I'm talking about. It's real. Those are actual toxic energy waves coming from that person's thought in their brain and their mind and their body. They are generating all this energy that is toxic, and that's what you're feeling. It's like having a little BB gun shot at you, or paintball. So that's how real it is. And so when we're in our natural wired full up mode, when we're in a non-destructive mode, we enhance. So it's like two waves. If you think of two waves in the sea, when two waves hit each other, they cancel each other, and it's flatline. That's competition. No one benefits. But when two waves go underneath each other, there's an enhancement. The wave gets bigger. And that's enhancement culture. That's the real bond or connection, deep, meaningful connection. So when I'm deeply recognizing my identity is, hey, I can do something that no one else can do. I don't have to be threatened by that. I'm not competition for anyone. That person's not my competition. That person's my what's the word I'm looking for? My aid, my support, my
collaborator.
Yeah, they're on my side. Everyone's on my side. No one is a competition. If we got into that mode, and there's been so much science showing this there's ancient science on this. You can go back thousands of years and find teachings on this in the ancient sort of texts and different religions and just ancient texts. And there's been 150 years of research in this sort of area. But it's not very well accepted in sort of the more, more physical-based science, where it's all about the brain body. That's seen as woo-woo stuff. Meanwhile, it's more accurate scientifically than a lot of the current medical science that we see that is supposedly more accurate. So if you look at and you really dissect these studies, so it's very interesting. But and the more quantum physics, for example, is huge in this, and it's one of the most accurate and fundamental of sciences. So the quantum experimentation is more accurate if you look at the rules of scientific research than a lot of the classical studies, which is very interesting. So essentially, what was I going to say now? What was I saying? Relating back to all the, in terms of identity, enhancement culture. So enhancement, we're so driven by Darwin, and there's obviously good in everything, every philosophy, but prior to Darwin, there was Lamarckian theory, and I don't want to go into any of this in depth because it's a whole huge area, but essentially it was not that we need to compete. Competition is not really what breeds success, or wiping someone out at the expense of someone else. That's never really worked. But if you really look at what's worked, it's if I enhance you, we don't specialize at the expense of others, we specialize at the enhancement of others. And if you look at the research on bond research and that kind of thing, we build each other, we grow as a community. So communities, for example, that are very community focused versus individualistic, they're much more successful in helping people with mental health, with relationships, with peace in the community, with just generally happiness, versus those that are very individualistic American society, which is one of the unhappiest societies in the world. There's not enough enhancement. It's all about, if you're doing well, that's a threat to me. That's absolute nonsense. If you're doing well, that's great for me, because that means you are enhancing me.
So what does it do when we can see someone else and celebrate their success authentically? What does that do for our mind our brain versus envy and jealousy and resentment and frustration that they're winning or succeeding and you're not at that level or something?
Okay, so the easiest way to see what it does in the mind is to think of like when you look at QuickTime. QuickTime has all the little bars going, or podcasts. That's what the memory looks like in your mind. So in your mind area, it's these waves. So a love wave is generally like a sine wave, versus when you're in any kind of envy and jealousy, it's a very erratic wave. And when that goes through your brain, it creates neurochemical chaos. So first of all, you've got neurochemical chaos. So you won't have enough balance between serotonin, dopamine, and anandamide and the various different chemicals, which then affects the hormone balance, which then affects heart palpitations and cardiovascular function, immune function. So every system of the body becomes disturbed. That's why we feel disturbed throughout our entire body. In the brain, we'll see an increase in high beta. High beta, if you think of a wave, when the wave is breaking and you see the white, that's high beta in the brain. Now, you're only supposed to have a burst of high beta and then it should crash and settle into a more gentle wave. But if you have a constant tsunami of high beta, it creates tremendous and almost sometimes shearing of axons. It can actually damage, it can actually cause physical damage to the axons because you've got too much of this wrong energy, too much of the wrong chemicals. And that can create all kinds of distortions that eventually make things like tau protein, which is actually a good thing, become a bad thing. And we hear that in Alzheimer's. And so eventually, if we have years and years and years of jealousy, envy, unmanaged mind, we're damaging our brain. And cumulatively over the years, we change the neurons, the neuronal structure, the levels of good and bad protein, amyloid beta, which is a very important good protein, but in the wrong quantities, it can create memory loss and all that kind of stuff. So eventually over time, we change the structural integrity of the brain. And so it causes brain damage. And envy and jealousy do that in a big, big way.
Really?
Competition, that stress that it causes, it creates toxic stress, very bad for your heart because it causes a constriction of blood vessels. Then that's less blood flow to the brain. And if you don't have enough blood flow to the brain, you become more impulsive. You lose your intelligence. You lose your cognitive flexibility. You'll have, instead of having lots of waves of high beta, gamma flowing from the back to the front of the brain in a balanced way, you're going to have a tsunami of gamma in unbalanced ways. That's not good. You're going to have an increase in delta too much during your conscious. So there's a lot of different patterns that start emerging, and we're learning more and more about this as science is advancing. So there's a definite impact, but you can change that. You can reverse that. That's the hope of neuroplasticity, of mind-directed neuroplasticity, because neuroplasticity can't happen on its own. It happens run by mind. So you direct it. So you can change that. So it's changeable, but it really creates a mess. And that isn't going to lead you, it's going to lead you to make decisions that maybe will get you to the top in a certain way, but the price you pay in relationships, health, happiness, peace, so many people that have got to the top in a competitive way are not happy people. And people on their deathbed, you ask them what they'll say, I wish I'd worked on my relationships and love. We designed for enhancement. You can still get to the top. Then also we've got to define what is getting to the top.
Right. Yeah.
There's a whole different redefinition needed of that too. At the moment, it's how many likes you have on Instagram, how many New York Times bestsellers you have, how many. We've got very, very toxic versions of what success is, and that needs to be changed as well.
Absolutely.
They're very competitive based.
This is fascinating. I'm curious about, I'm just thinking about a majority of my life where I was competition focused. And
we grew up in that environment.
I actually like competition, but more of like toxic competition maybe, where it's like, I need to be the best. I need to be number one. I need to win at all costs. Otherwise I don't feel loved and supported and, desirable or whatever it is. I'm all for competition and bringing the best out of each other.
Yeah, that's enhancement though. That's not even competition. That is, okay, let's enhance each other. Let's see who can do the best, whatever, create the best.
Exactly.
And then it's like everything's to be celebrated. But as you are building, so if you shift your mindset and say, okay, we've got a competition here for someone who's going to build the best new version of quantum computers, because they're busy trying to do that at the moment. So if instead of it being a competition, let's talk about an enhancement. So everyone is throwing everything at it. Let's actually take the vaccine, COVID, the COVID. If we had more enhancement versus competition, we would have had a vaccine earlier and distributed to the poor countries quicker. Right. But it's the competition and the desire for finance that has taken precedent over humanity. And that's an example where, a lot of the scientists didn't want that. A lot of the scientists want to do share each of the, so it's
what's working with everyone.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've got something to bring to the table, and so do I. You complete a piece of the puzzle, so do I. So if we put our heads together instead of competing against each other, that's going to lead to success, global humanitarian type success, as opposed to, because it takes one man to make a difference. So it's how we look at it. It's just like our whole perspective needs to shift.
Yeah.
We're getting deep here. I love talking to you. We get into all these really excellent things.
It's called the School of Greatness, Caroline.
I love it.
School of Average.
That's fantastic.
Not that we're competing or needing to be the best.
No, we're enhancing each other. Greatness means a beautiful thing. It means we are growing. What is it that you bring to the table that I don't? I must tell you a quick story, if I may, just about that statement. Years ago, when I worked in South Africa, one of the things I did was I trained teachers. I used to work in the apartheid era and the transition. I don't know if I told you this before, but I spent 3 days a week in apartheid South Africa, working in apartheid transition and post when Mandela came to power. And I saw firsthand the impact of terribly evil social structures on humanity. And that's why I chose to do that at the same time as doing my research and working in private practice with people that had a lot of money and could afford to see a therapist. And so that was one of the best experiences of my life. That's where I learned what I really know about life and about this field that I'm in, because I saw how humanity, when you put your mind to stuff, it's just incredible. It's School of Greatness, honestly, was that time period. And I used to train a lot of teachers in the education environment to try and help uplift the terrible education that the Black population had been exposed to. So part of my team, we worked with over 300,000 people. We actually reached more, but we would work with teachers and students. And one of the projects was 300,000. What we would do is go in and train the teachers on how to use their brain and how to learn how to build their brain, how to manage emotions, how to just really get the most out of the mind-brain connection, and then how to adapt this into the education system so that you could transfer knowledge more effectively. Because literally these schools would have one textbook, 100 kids, piece of chalk this size, an old chalkboard that didn't work, and they would get the kids to literally repeat and regurgitate with no understanding. And I remember teaching one of these schools, and I'd always teach identity first. Was the first session when I trained teachers was identity for themselves, identity for their students, and then I'd go into the techniques. And as I started this, one teacher stood up, and he was so aggressive. I'll never forget. He just said, "Dr. Leaf, I'm sorry, but you have got it wrong. There is a kid in my class who is so stupid and so difficult that there's no ways that he could learn anything or he could change." And I mean, it was worse than that. He really went on. It was just like a whole mouthful of venom. And I was so dumbstruck, and I'm very seldom dumbstruck. And one of the other teachers in the class stood up and said, "Sir, that child that you say is so stupid can do something that you can't do. And it's your responsibility to trigger that in that child."
Wow.
I tell you, this was
That's
nearly
beautiful.
25, 28 years ago. It changed me forever. And that's where I started researching identity in a big way in my work after that. And that's what we're talking about here. When we recognize that in other people, and that my role is to bring out the best in you, your role is to bring out the best in me, we change society. It's not that I'm trying to beat you. It's that I'm trying to bring out the best in you. It's a totally different perspective.
Absolutely. I want to talk about brain building for a little bit before we wrap things up, because I know this was something we mentioned a few times.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what should we do the moment we realize we're being triggered and feeling a lot of emotions? Should we lean into brain building, or is brain building something you do before that?
Such a good question. So when I'm very, very emotionally triggered, the first thing I'll do is that 10-second
How
pause.
often does it happen for you?
It's less and less now. I used to get very easily thrown because I think that intense desire to please, I think you can relate. Things would throw me very quickly, and I would get things under control because I'm very Energizer Bunny. But yeah, I would get thrown very quickly. But I know now if I'm in a very challenging situation and I'm very emotionally triggered, I will I will do the 10-second pause because I've got to get my neurochemistry under control. I do it 6 to 9 times. So it's about 60 to 90 seconds, which is enough time from the research that I've done and others that have done this, that in this field, that gets your neurochemistry calm down and your blood flow and everything to a point where you're okay. And then I kind of check, am I calm enough to kind of move forward? And then I do brain building. And I would do this with all my patients. Just as an aside note, I never started a session without an identity check and brain building, and then we would dive into the heavy stuff. So I always got them in a place in brain preparation. I always got them in a place where they were ready to do the work, hard work, before we did any heavy stuff. So then I'll go brain build. So I'll go, and brain building is essentially using the neurocycle. So it's the same 5 steps, but now instead of detoxing, identifying and detoxing and reconstructing, you're actually just building. So it's the same 5-step process, because the neurocycle is simply the science of thought. It is how we use our mind to grow stuff in our brain, and it's controlling the process and get stuff out of our brain. That's really what the neurocycle is. That's why I say it's a delivery system for doing that. So then you take whatever you're interested in, and I'm totally, as you know, interested in brain science. So I'll take every day. I mean, I do this every day. You said, what's my routine? But in that moment, I'll take something like I'm always creating podcasts like yourself, solo podcasts and things. So I'm always writing books. I'm always doing journal articles. writing a scientific article is an enormously challenging, extremely difficult thing to do. So any project that I'm busy with like that, I'll go and dive into it. I'll go and either prepare a podcast, do work on a journal article, because that requires brain building. It requires me to read complex stuff that I have to read a couple of lines and then I have to stop. So I have to gather the information, which is the read part, gather, where we spoke before about gathering awareness. Now I'm talking about gathering awareness in terms of reading that information. I do it out loud and I do it with my pen, literally underlining it, because that brings all my senses together. I explained this in depth, by the way, in this book and also in the app. All the stuff we've been talking about is in the book and the app. Then I stop and I literally look up and I talk out. I ask, do the reflect step. So I ask, answer, and discuss. What have I just read? What does this mean? What's the stuff here? Because you can just read, and then until I can discuss it, and I know, okay, it means this. And when I'm doing that reflect step, I go back in with my pen or my pencil and I circle. I don't underline. I circle, because when you circle, you get to the key concepts. The concepts are where the information is stored. We don't recall 100%, we recall conceptually. So you want to build conceptually. Conceptually is where the core information is. It's about 15 to 35% of information. So if you take a simple sentence like, the cat sat on the mat. The cat sat on the mat. 7 words. What is it? 7 words, 6 words. The concepts would be around about 2 words. Cat, mat with an arrow. That's what you want to get to. You want to get to the concept level. So in the reflect step, you are rereading it and circling and asking, answering, discussing and finding. So what you want to circle is 30% max. Then you write that down onto the metacog and you organize it. Yeah. So you organize it and you write it down. And then you go back and say, okay, does this match what I've just read? And then you say yes and you discuss it. Then you go to the next sentence. And that process, it totally puts your brain into one of the most highly resilient states that you can get. It calms down your brain, the neurochemistry, the blood flow, balances the two sides of the brain, increases your gamma activity, which in the right way, which is what you want, because it pulls stuff from the non-conscious to the conscious. And it also gets you into a state where you are like a sponge to learn. And when you get into that state, your brain goes into a tremendous state of brain health. It's like your brain loves this. It's like literally your brain is in love with brain building. I should say that in the book. And so you now feel a sense of peace and excitement and wisdom. And as I'm brain building, suddenly often happens, as I'm doing the brain building, the metacog, then the recheck, as I'm doing that, suddenly I'll get to a point where, that's the solution. And I feel it's a sense of peace and I can go and handle that situation. So I've trained myself to do that. I don't, as far as possible, try and solve a crisis unless you have to solve it on the spot. But I try to always stand back and say, okay, I need a bit of time. I'm going to go and calm down. I'm going to go and do even this kind of thing that we're doing now is brain building.
Brain building, learning,
because learning. It's learning, and it's very and if you look in my book on chapter 14, I actually have my daily routine. I don't know if you want to talk about that now in another thing, but brain building is one of the first things I do in the morning. So, and I do it through the day.
What is what's the best thing to do for yourself at night to clean out the mental mess?
So the best thing to do at night is to start in the morning. So when you wake up, it sets the tone for the day. So you want to
don't have a negative attitude in the morning.
Catch it early, and then catch it during the course of the day. So sleep prep starts in the AM, and you've got to do a check-in at lunchtime as well. So I do that every day. So it really does. It starts. I mean, I wake up and I check immediately, self-regulate, immediately mind manage. What's my mood? What's my mindset? And if it's complaining or negative or I'm worrying, I catch it immediately. I work out why. I do a quick neurocycle in my bed. It takes me 2 minutes. I do it so quickly. Immediately go into brain with my coffee. Obviously, I will do some brain building, even if it's 15 minutes. And then I will start, getting ready and doing the detoxing. Then during the course of the day, I'll take periods where I'll do thinker moments. And thinker moments are where you activate what we call the default mode network in your brain, which is very important to restore energy, restore balance, just to reset. We've got to reset. And the thinker moment you can reset in a few seconds. And it's great to have a 10-minute block if you can during the course of the day, preferably in the sunshine if you can. And all you do there is daydream. You literally close your eyes, switch off to the external, switch on to the internal, and just let your mind have a bit of a rest. And that is very, very powerful. There's tons more I can say about that. And it is in the book, but that's like another 2-hour discussion. But it is so powerful. Thinker moments are unbelievably restorative. So I make...
What do you call them? What moments?
Thinker moments. Thinker moments. Thinker as in THINKER.
Thinker moments.
Thinker moments. Sorry.
You sound like an American over here.
Yeah, there we go. I have to go American. Thinker.
You gotta go to the Dallas. Yeah.
I'll have to get the.
Slang.
I did
Thinker.
2 English instead of thinker.
Yeah, thinker.
So that's
thinker
just switching
moments. Yeah.
It's basically switching off to the external, switching on to the internal, allowing thoughts to move through your mind, daydreaming. You find out then what's going on. What are you actually thinking about? What's dominant? What are the patterns? Phenomenally powerful. And that's another whole long discussion. But I make sure that I do those frequently, and I try and take a 10-minute break in the middle of the day where I do that. And then at nighttime, before I go to sleep, there's other stuff I do. It's in the book, but it's in that chapter 14. But just before I go to sleep, I will make sure I do a whole check, also using the neurocycle. What are my emotions? What are my signals? What am I thinking of? What am I reflecting on? And get order. And then, okay, this is what worrying me. This is worrying me. This is worrying me. I'm feeling this. I'm feeling that. So I do the neurocycle and I get to the active reach where, okay, I can't fix this now, but this is what I can do. Type it in my phone. I'll do this tomorrow. I'll do this. This is a solution here, that there. So I get my little solutions. It takes me 5 minutes and I calm down and I'll watch a movie like Friends or something. That's been my obsession lately, is watching Friends before bed or something fun, relaxing, and then fall asleep. And then as I said earlier on, I'm busy now with setting up a research study on dreams and how you can actually, there's a lot of research showing how you can actually prepare yourself for dreaming, because dreaming is restorative and we're learning more and more about dreaming. And so I want to start doing that, because you can actually, especially people that battle with night terrors and nightmare paralysis and nightmares, and because it's all just your mind processing, because your mind's processing during the day. So it's to try and help people find more information there and whatever. But I always find that helps to prepare myself for sleep.
That's beautiful. And if you guys want us to do another episode on dream states, then leave the hashtag dreams below as well in the comments on YouTube, just so we can see how many people are interested in that. Again, put a hashtag relationships if you want to learn more about that. This has been fascinating. Hopefully next time we can do it in person. If you're coming to LA, we'd love to have you in person.
It'll be so nice. And you've got to come on my podcast as well. We've got to carry. We can just keep the series going. I mean, yours, mine. Seriously, it's just so great. I have the best discussions with you.
It's been beautiful. We've covered a lot today, and I want to wrap things up here. But if we could, if someone could pull one thing from this, we covered a lot. But if we could do one thing where they can implement moving forward, just one thing. Or one thing they could think about differently to help improve the quality of their life, what would that one thing be based on what we talked about?
I would say to understand the concept that your mind is not your brain, and your mind changes your brain. And that based on that, what I've been saying throughout this interview, you can't change what's happened to you, but you can change what's happening in you. You have that power. And I think just that awareness, if people can start developing that awareness, they get autonomy and empowerment. They're on the pathway to empowerment.
That's beautiful. You've got an incredible book. It's been spreading all over the world in a beautiful way. It's called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, 5 Simple, Scientifically Proven Steps to Reduce Anxiety, Stress, and Toxic Thinking that people can dive into. It's extremely practical, but it's got all of the neuroscience and the research backing everything on how you can apply these simple steps into your life under these stressful, overwhelming moments that we all have faced, and hopefully give you a lot more clarity and peace. So make sure you guys get a few copies of the book. It's powerful. I really like it, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. Also, I'm excited to check out your app, Neurocycle. I haven't downloaded it yet, so I'm going to download it right after this. Make sure you guys download the app. That's in the App Store, I'm assuming, and everywhere else.
iTunes, Google Play, it's all over the place. And it keeps
Neurocycle.
getting updated, so yeah.
And you're the voice, huh? You're the one who's...
I'm the voice. It's my creation. It's my baby. I do all of it, so it's no one else.
It's amazing.
I mean, I have a team of engineers, obviously, but I do all the talking.
You're the content,
The content,
so we can download Neurocycle, the app, and also your podcast, which is Clean Up the Mental Mess.
Yeah, same name as the book.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lots of more great stuff there. We also had another interview that has blown up over on YouTube and on audio, so if you guys want to listen to that or watch that, we'll link it up as well. And I asked you your 3 truths and your definition of greatness the last time. So if you guys want to hear what those are, make sure you go check out the previous episode as well. And I want to acknowledge again, Dr. Caroline Leaf, for showing up so brilliantly. You've got decades, almost 4 decades of wisdom and research and case studies and experience in this field. And it's so powerful the way you explain it, the way you articulate it, the way you simplify challenging concepts that seem so overwhelming with examples, with models, with, props. You're just making it easier for people like myself to understand how to manage our mind and master our mind. So I appreciate and acknowledge you for the gift you are in this world. And I'm excited to do more of this with you and help more people together.
Thank you so much. It's very kind of you. Thank you.
Of course. My final question for you is, what's the thing that you hope to improve more in your life the rest of this year?
I have to get a mastery of being able to help people see the importance of mind and understand mind. So diving into more research studies, finding easier ways to explain this, because I just know if we can get people to understand how their mind works and how to manage it, we're going to have a better world. We're going to start being able to get these social constructs and things that are damaging the world, like racism and just the competitiveness and the hatred and the wrong narratives around mental health that are damaging so many people. I just want people to be able to shift. So that's really, I'm so driven to get that message through. So thank you for being able to helping me to do that. So, and I, by the way, think you're amazing. I mean, what you've gone through and how you've turned that around and how you express yourself, you're phenomenal. You really are.
Thank you. Always learning, always growing. I appreciate it.
I see that.
Well, Dr. Caroline Leaf, thank you so much for being here. I was always excited to have you back on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's just a practice of being thoughtful about what I put in my mouth, what I put on my body, and people go, isn't that hard? And I'm like, being sick is hard.
That's hard.
This is easy.